Bienvenidos a un nuevo episodio de Wikijulio. Hoy tengo un invitado supremamente especial y siento que es una voz muy única. Es un inglés que vive en Nueva York que terminó diseñando portadas para rock latinoamericano. Ha trabajado la portada de discos como El Circo de la Maldita Vecindad, trabajó el arte de algunos sencillos y álbumes de Fobia, pero de pronto el más icónico de ellos sea El Silencio de Caifanes. Me parece increíble la historia de persecución de este personaje, sobre todo porque además es un tipo muy interesante que también trabajó en artes para pósters y cosas con Prince y con David Bowie en proyectos como Tin Machine. Me llama mucho la atención toda la vuelta que da la historia de este personaje y sobre todo porque es un man del que hay muy poquita información en internet. Uno no puede googlear y encontrar entrevistas. La única que yo encontré tal vez fue una charla que él tuvo con un periódico norteamericano en el 91 o algo así, pero resulta un tipo que tiene la mano metida en un montón de discos de rock de habla hispana. Me pude sentar a hablar con él, se preguntarán de quién se trata, es Roger Gorman. Póngale cuidado a la conversación, es interesantísima, revela una cantidad de cosas y en la oficina donde él está dándome la entrevista en Nueva York hay un par de discos premiados. Póngale cuidado a la charla.
I gotta say it, I'm a bit impressed because to be like 100% honest with you, I read like a tweet where someone mentioned that you did this album cover for Caifanes. So I start like researching about you and reading about what you've done before, and I'm impressed in how little information there is and how much you've done. You know what it's like. What I've read, you work in art for Bowie and Prince and a lot of artists, and there aren't that many pieces or interviews. So I was thinking, okay, who's this guy? Caifanes. How does it
Right.
connect? And then I start finding, old articles from 1991 and things like that in the New York Times, maybe. And I'm like, how come? Why there aren't more like interviews about your work and all that? It was weird.
I fly under the radar. That's what I like to do. One of the things is I'm a classic English person. Obviously I've had the opportunity to work with some great artists over time, but unless you ask me, I would never tell anybody in the weirdest way. So basically the way I look at it is like I'm a visual plumber. Someone calls me in, they've got a problem, they've got a leak. My job is to fix it. And then once that's done, kind of move on. And to a certain extent, and especially with like Caifanes, is, like if you find a good plumber after a couple of visits, you don't question him anymore. You don't look over his shoulder and stuff. So basically that's what tended to happen with Caifanes, is after the first couple of albums, it will be a case of I would get a call or an email or something. And so basically, oh, we're recording a new album. This is basically the theme. Come up with something. So it's, it's been a fun journey. And what has sort of like, is very funny is obviously they went fairly dormant in the sense of like Caifanes / Jaguares for a while. But obviously now there's sort of like this reappreciation of them. And obviously they're doing exceptionally well touring and sending out a lot of venues. And then in the last couple of years, I was called back in to design a couple of singles, etc. So, it's been a long journey.
Yeah, I mean, but you gotta understand from my point of view, it's weird, right? Because how does you get involved with the Caifanes? Because from what I've read, you started working with them from their second album, right? El
That's
Diablito.
correct. Yeah, yes.
So, and by El Diablito, they were a pretty young band back then. So, how was that? How was that connection?
How did it happen? Okay, well, this is what happened. Is like obviously I was running a design studio in New York City, and a Mexican photographer came to see me, Cesar Vera, and I started using him quite often on projects. And he was very good friends with Caifanes. And Caifanes were in New York City to record the second album. I think it was Electric Ladyland. And And he suggested, you know, to them, because, you know, obviously he was socializing, you should come and see my friend Roger, and maybe he could help you design. So basically, he brought them to the studio, and we got on very well. Obviously, they speak much better English than I speak Spanish and stuff. And basically, you know, it started from there, and it just it just became this. Every couple of years I, you know, do another one, but I sort of became, you know, quite friendly with them, and during the early part would go down to Mexico and sort of like hang out a little bit. I'd go down with Cesar, the photographer, and stuff. So it became like, you know, a nice working relationship, you know, where, you know, I appreciated them and they appreciated me. So, you know, it was kind of nice.
When back then, when everything started, did you have like any musical references from Latin music? It's much easier today to just log online and Google anything. But back then, you know, okay, we have this designer, we have this band, work on it, come up with something. Do you had any references? You even listened to Latin music back then?
Oh, no. I mean, obviously, you know, once you work with an artist, very often they'll supply you with the music. So I wasn't completely aware of Latin, you know, Mexican Latin rock. And obviously over the couple of years, we sort of like, you know, we worked with other bands like Fobia and stuff like that along the way, is because it suddenly seemed like I was doing work for Mexican bands and stuff. And when they first came in, I mean, when one, you know, meets the band and they talk about the music, and I think this, you know, the first album was a much more kind of Cure / goth kind of like approach. Whereas I think the second album started embracing the mythology of Mexico. And so as soon as someone says Mexico mythology, you know, you're up and running, because I mean, the art of Mexico is amazing, right? So,
Yeah.
and then, and to a certain extent, you know, when I look back at the, you know, El Diablito, it's sort of like, it's maybe I was a little bit too kind of like innocent in the sense of not really knowing enough about the mythology. So we picked up on obviously those kind of like lotteria cards, you know, the folk emblems and stuff like that. Was it Milagro, I think they're called, or something? I'm not quite sure. But anyway, so, you know, so basically you're kind of poking around in the dark for the first album, because you're trying to like work out what might represent them, but also would make like for a good cover. And to a certain extent, one of the things was they already had established photography for the album cover.
Okay.
So, you know, so basically it's like, you know, we want to use this on the front cover. And, you know, my first reaction to that was like, we can't just do a picture of you guys. It's got to say more about where you're from. You know, it's got to be a little bit more. So basically what I did was, and this was like, you know, the early days of color Xeroxing and that kind of stuff, was to, you know, get those lotteria cards, then blow them up as color Xeroxes on clear acetates. And then basically we did a collage. We laid these elements onto the photo and then took a shot of the whole setup. And obviously, you know, it was supposed to be known as Caifanes 2, the album, but because we left that El Diablito along the bottom, suddenly that became the title of the album. You know, it just became a part of it, you know. So, you know, so to a certain extent, and you know, it was funny because when I knew I was going to be chatting with you today, I sort of thought, let me just go back and look at the cover again. And you know, and like anything, you know, that you've created over 30 years ago, you kind of say to yourself, I wouldn't have done it that way. it looks a little clumsy, but the thing is, you have to judge it for its time. When it came out in 1990, I think it was, then basically 34 years later. So it's a part of its time. So in that sense, you know, it's very recognizable and stuff, but it's sort of like I kind of think like it could have been a bit more polished.
Okay. And
Yeah,
then El Silencio came, right?
right.
That
Which I'm sorry to interrupt, but one of my favorite covers.
it's
You know,
that's a great cover.
it's almost, well, I mean, obviously it's iconographic to a certain degree, and at that time they were recording El Silencio out in Wisconsin, and Adrian Belew was the producer on the album, and so and that time Marusa Reyes, the manager, was now the manager of the band, and she sort of said like, you got to fly out there, go visit them, listen to the music and stuff. So basically it became apparent that they were even more mining the idea of Mexico and what they thought and what was going on. So that cover, I kind of thought about it, and I thought about it as like, again, mining classic, what you call it, Mexican iconography.
Yeah.
It was like the face, it's like, how can I show a breadth of the history? And so that's why the mouth was Mesoamerican, the nose was sort of like Mayan, and then obviously the classic Madonna eyes, because Spain had come over and like conquered this country basically. So it was just, so I'm sorry, please carry on.
No, please continue.
Yeah. So basically it was kind of this face. And then I painted that little background, which was a ripoff of the Madonna of Guadalupe in the background, that kind of graphic to kind of hold it together. And, and it kind of worked, just this simple motif on a white cover.
Yeah, I mean, did you like took the pictures of the whole things to put the thing together? Someone took you to a place where you could find those subjects?
No, in those days, there wasn't any internet. So you went to a photo library where, so basically you researched images and basically, you found a slide that had the whole face, and then you just like took the detail. So that's where you used to get your art then, before basically you go online now and you Google it and it's there in a second. You'd have to sit in the photo library, and there was quite a few in New York City. And obviously you pay for the usage of the image, but basically you just had to go and literally go and research it.
About something you mentioned earlier, the whole sort of pure vibe they had. When you listen to the band for the first time and everything happened around that time, did it affect the way you wanted to have the art done for those records?
Not to a certain extent. In some cases, it's sort of like you get talking to the artist, you get like a certain kind of vibe from it, and then you sort of go, basically go off and play. And I don't, obviously it's a little way back, but I don't remember us coming up with many different versions then, because obviously putting together comps and layouts was a lot more time consuming than it is now. It's like for the last, the one before last Caifanes single, I showed them 12 possible solutions to a cover, because it's easy to put together now with Photoshop and InDesign and all that kind of stuff. So you can, whereas before it was more of a case of like going with your gut instinct, what you think might work, and presenting the idea. And it was also the time when we sort of developed the Caifanes typeface a little bit more, because it was kind of based on like Aztec writing, the way they used to do the typography. So to a certain extent, with Caifanes, I've been mining Mexican visuals, for years.
Okay. Which other Latin artists have you worked with?
Look, for everyone, we've done Luis Miguel, Maldita, Vecindad. Is it Melissa Vecindad?
Maldita Vecindad.
Yeah, exactly right. And Fobia.
Okay, you did what? El Circo by Maldita Vecindad?
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
So
great.
Yeah, I mean, I remember going to see them in Mexico City when I went to visit them, and I saw them play for the first time. I was just blown away by the energy of that band.
They're awesome. They're still performing.
Yeah, and so is Fobia too. I mean, you know, there's a longevity to these artists and stuff. So,
And still, considered very influential when it comes to Latin music. Which Fobia cover?
oh, I forget the name. It's the one with the fish on the front.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And
Okay.
then the other one was this one. Hang on. I don't know if you remember this, but the Fobia can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you did that?
Yes.
Cool.
You know,
And
there
then
was a time. Well, what happened was just. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna. You know, we designed a Metallica can, and suddenly paint cans were all in. So then when Fobia saw this, it was like, we want to do what you call it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are those records in the back?
Oh, they're gold. They're like gold records for David Bowie.
Oh, cool. For the low?
Yeah, you know, no, changes Bowie and also sound and vision. But what tends to happen? Yeah. So what tends to happen is that I think everyone who's involved in a project, if they sell X number of records, everyone gets one of these things. You know. And I leave them up there because if I am doing what you call it, a Zoom or a FaceTime, it impresses the corporate clients.
Hey, that's a great point of view.
Sometimes because all they are is a piece of plastic in a frame, but sometimes it's good just to push your resume visually in a sense.
Of course.
Yeah.
I read that you guys worked with Queensrÿche art
Yes.
also.
Yes.
And also a story, I think I found it on Metal Hammer, maybe something about and justice for all, but I couldn't really they had just a small quote of you guys working with Metallica, and I think it was your brother also involved with the
Yeah. My brother,
Justice for All.
Yeah, my brother was an illustrator in Germany for a long period of time, and now he works. Now he's in museum work, but basically there was a little bit of nepotism there, and we sort of used my brother to create the artwork for the Justice for All.
Cool. There's very interesting story, and just what I told you. There's very little information on all of the work you've done. There's an article that mentioned Prince and Michael Jackson. There's an article that mentions Bowie and Metallica, and pretty much that's it. I was like, how come? I found your name on a tweet by some member of Caifanes.
Right.
And it was probably a tweet from years ago because I was researching on album covers. I love to read about album covers. I'm not a designer or anything. I just found it really interesting, So that's why I'm here.
No, that's great. No, it's funny. The thing is, if I've never had to work hard at going out to get work. I always find it comes to me. I sort of establish a reputation. There was a time when I was in New York City and I had, pre-internet and graphic tools on computer. I had, 4 people working for me. And I also had a studio in Los Angeles for 2 years as well. So it's sort of now I'm down to one person, and I love being down to one person because I don't have to worry about anybody else. And I can afford just to work on projects that, I'm enjoying. It's like at the moment I'm working with Carlos Santana on a visual history book. It's like a 400-page book. So, it's like I get very nice projects still and stuff. And, and I keep on, ticking over. But, it's sort of I've done interviews in the past. I did an interview for Australian radio station a little while back. Every now and then I'll go give a talk or an art school and stuff. But, it's sort of it's, low key. Okay,
But it's, I insist, it's very interesting when I found like, okay, the art for El Silencio wasn't made by a Latin artist. Like, okay, did you know, since it has these iconic things there
Yes.
from Mexican culture, I know you don't have to be Mexican to be a designer and understand the art and whatever, but it is impressive because it's an album from the 90s, so things
Right.
change. Um, do you have like a favorite art, like a top album covers that you just enjoy besides the one you've done, besides the one you've created?
Yeah, well, to a certain extent, there's a record company. Oh God, it's out of Germany. That does, I'm very much into very noisy psychedelic kind of bands and stuff. I mean, that's the kind of music I like. If it annoys people, I love it and stuff. And there's a record company, and I can't think of it right now, that's out of there that does these really exquisite like art covers and stuff. I
Like
mean, I
hypnosis?
no, actually, what is very funny is I actually worked for Hypnosis when I was at art school in London. I used to do all their pay stuff and stuff while I was
Uh-huh.
at school. Yes. So it was sort and when I was in high school, when I used to do my art classes, usually the things I did was mop album covers. So
Okay.
I've always sort of had like sort of like been drawn to the graphics of creating art and stuff for music.
What are your thoughts now with streaming? Because I remember back in the day going to record stores and buying records because I love the album covers. Maybe I
Right.
just know a few tracks from an album and I say that's a beautiful art, you gotta buy it. Or some pictures, images, photographs that just sort of caught your attention. Punk has aesthetic. Alt rock had aesthetic back with Pearl Jam, Foo Fighters, and all those bands. So, what are your thoughts now? Since I had to say it sadly, it's not the way it used to be. Having a vinyl and watching the art and reading the lyrics and all that. Have you ever like reflected on that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. Look, I still buy vinyl. I still go to record stores. There's it's there it's when I was young, it used to be the best thing. I lived outside of London. My brother and I would catch the train up into London. We would go to record stores. We'd go to Virgin and places like that, and you just go through. You could listen to the music. You could go through the albums and stuff. And it's something that you kind of miss. And when everything went from vinyl to CD, there was obviously a drop in, what you could work with. And then obviously once it went to streaming, that kind of went out the window. You kind of lost that aesthetic of holding something in your hand, and relating to the visuals, to the music, whatever. And obviously, to a certain extent, it's come back quite a lot. I mean, I live up here in Albany. There's a bunch of record stores up here, that I frequent every couple of weeks. I'll drop by and just see what's coming is in the rack. I mean, it's a very enjoyable pastime.
I love it myself too. I buy vinyl. I
Yeah,
even though I like streaming and I know it helps you to reach to a huge amount of music around the world and all that, but I like to hold it. I like to check the art and look for the credits and all that. So yeah, I wanted to know your point of view on that because I think some records, some album covers are still as iconic. So I like to search for that. So that's why
right.
once again got me into this British man living in New York who designed album covers for a Mexican band.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's sort of like I created like a little niche for myself, you know, doing like Mexican stuff, and it was kind of fun because no one ever saw that here, especially when I first started working for the Mexican bands. I
Yeah.
mean, and so it was sort of like this small world I kind of worked in for a while. I mean, obviously that's changed now. I mean, it's become a lot more popular and everyone has access to it. But back then, when we were first starting. And the other thing was too, you know, just going back to covers and stuff, is that, you know, when CDs came out, there was like a long box. I don't know if you remember that, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So you had these formats, and you know, there was cassettes, and then there was like those smaller kind of CD-ROM things too. So basically, you had all these different variations on how you use the artwork. You know, from the vinyl to the long box to the CD cover, whatever. So, you know, you could play around with that. I mean, there was one project that I sort of did for Bowie, which was Tin Machine.
Yeah.
And the first album was them, you know, sort of like just the four figures in a pure white background. But, you know, the thing is, what we did when we shot them, I shot them for all the different kind of variations. And there was no hierarchy. Bowie was in the back, Gabriel's was in the front, and then we moved them around. So there was this very kind of, you know, kind of like variations on a theme, you know, and those were fun things to do at that time. You know, nowadays, you know, when you do, you know, it's like when I've done the last Caifanes singles, basically it's just an electronic file that gets posted with the music.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, there's a loss.
One, being Bowie so visual and everything, how was it like, you know, to come up with something? You know, was that something that was around your mind, like thinking, okay, I'm working with this guy whose art it's so important for every record?
Yeah, well, I mean, with like Tin Machine, you know, basically it was a breakaway kind of project for him.
Yeah.
That was more raw, hard rock. So you know, so then you kind of think to yourself, okay, so how are we going to portray that? And obviously, the antithesis is to dress them up in nice suits and have them posing on the front cover. So, you know, sometimes contrast is the fun thing, because it's sort of like, you know, when you see a cover that looks like this and then you put the music on and it's completely the opposite, you know, it kind of like catches your attention more. So sometimes it's kind of fun just to do something that's really not quite right, but in some cases it works. And so, you know, it becomes, you know, a great graphic.
Yeah, and you know, they only did like 2 albums, right? Tin Machine.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the second one was a real headache, because they wanted to be represented by 4 Greek statues. So basically, you know, I don't remember which is the cover with Bowie with the dog. Was it not Diamond Dogs?
Diamond Dogs. Yeah, he has
okay.
this long.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, we got the same painter who did that to paint the 4 statues, but obviously he left their genitalia in place. And when we, you know, when the artwork, as record companies used to do then, was to send around these promos to the record stores, Walmart refused to carry it because it had genitalia, even though there were classic Greek statues, which we've all seen a million times when we go visit Greece or whatever. It was deemed as being offensive. So therefore, we had to have the artists repaint it so it looked like the genitalia had been kind of chipped away, as they used to do, you know, when Roman emperors got deposed and the next emperor came in, very often they would, you know, kind of basically chisel away the features of the past statue to get rid of the old emperor. So basically it was, you know, playing on that, but when you sort of see the cover with the chipped off genitalia, it looks even more kind of like ridiculous. But you know, that's what we have to do sometimes.
Yeah,
you know?
and it was a different time, right?
Yes, it was a different time. Yes, yeah.
Roger, I don't want to take much of your time. I'm just finding out that I could talk for hours with you about all of this stuff, man. Because you know, since there's so little information, like you know, Prince is one of my top artists like ever. I'm a big Prince fan. And all of this, your approach on Latin music, there'll be lots of more things to talk about. If that's okay with you, I'll probably contact you in a different time to talk a bit more about this, since I think it's actually fascinating. But first of all, well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me.
But just for on Prince, we got fired by Prince 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, it was never one of the things you realize is when you get fired, and I've been fired by many people in many places. I've been fired by the Rolling Stones, David Lee Roth, and is that it's nothing to do with you and your work, it's to do with the temperament of the artist. And you know, and this was the time when I had 4 people working for me, and when I worked on the first Prince tour, you know, I spent so much time with him out in Minnesota, and we went through all these files, we chose all these images, we showed him a rough layout, and then we went to England to show the final proofs of the project. And then he's kind of looked at it and said, I hate this. I didn't approve this, you know, and he was just in a pissy mood, you know. So what happened was, you know, basically the merchandiser who I was working for said, like, we got rid of Roger, no problem. We got a new person for you. And basically it was someone else from my company, and they would go out. And so and this happened 3 times during our time with him, you know. It's just one of those, you know, it's a laugh sometimes, you know. And the thing is, what you can't do is take it personally, you know.
Yeah.
You just got to be confident in your work and what you can deliver, you know. But sometimes artists can be a little bit, you know, difficult to work with.
Yeah, and special Prince, right?
Oh God, I mean, me too. I love the music. I mean, an amazing artist and stuff. But you know what? It's like when you're actually working for it, you think, you horrible little man, you know. So it's sort of, you know, it's what can you say? You know, it's like anybody you work for, right?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
The way you get rid of tension and anger is just to blow off steam a little bit, you know.
I had the chance talking. I've interviewed before musicians who work with Prince, you know, who were the backup band and things like that, and all of them pretty much say the same. Like, the guy's a genius. It's godlike figure, incredible mind, incredible artist, and everything. But it was something else. It was something else to work with. Oh well, Roger, once again. Please.
My pleasure. I mean, it's lovely talking to you. And, you know, if you just want to pick this up again sometime in the future, you know where to find me.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely will. Well, but once again, thank you very much, man. Have a very nice day.
You too. Great meeting you. You take care.
Great. Same. If you ever come to Colombia, let me know.
Oh, whereabouts in Colombia are you?
I'm in Bogota.
In Bogota. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Do let me know.
That's great.
We'll go and search for vinyls.
Okay. That sounds great. Cheers, Julio.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Y ese es Roger Gorman. Me parece que tiene una historia interesantísima que contar y cómo él termina vinculándose con el sonido del rock latinoamericano. Si quieren encontrar más entrevistas como estas y más contenido de este tipo, recuerden seguir el canal Wikijulio. Mi nombre es Julio César Escobar. Gracias por estar acá, gracias por escribir, sobre todo gracias por compartir.